this would be a very challenging thing to do, but I don't know how much appetite there is now for a response. But I have made some notes, so I'll try and be succinct. In terms of, obviously a dominant theme is materials, which runs into surfaces, which runs into colour. And I think that it came over really, for me, more clearly than ever before, not only how careful Hepworth was to get unusual materials and her level of involvement. I think we all knew that she was involved, but I think it came through very clearly how especially involved she was. But also I think what came through today and yesterday was her interest in differentiation of or contrast. So, and whether she used paint or used patina to find those contrasts. I think that came through really strongly, for the first time, so strongly. And in terms of resources, I was thinking, Hepworth is so unusual in terms of the wide range of resources that we have available to us. It's not just places, all the different kinds of places that we've seen. It's also the different kinds of archives. It's the different kind of people who've been involved in studying her work. And we've heard 20 different people here in the last day and a half. It's very unusual to have an artist to have that level of concentration. And the records that she kept and which conservators have kept and the tests which now can be done. So we have a very diverse range of material. I think it's quite special. And that range of voices, I think it could be heard more and used more. Someone, I forget who, talked about the undisturbed evidence in the site. And I think it's maybe interesting to think about the relationship between the undisturbed evidence that we need to identify, but then thinking about the evidence that we need to disturb to get more out of it. And obviously, in thinking about Hepworth in particular, but any single artist, we're always thinking about biography. I think when I began working on Hepworth, I felt that the whole concept of landscape was very old-fashioned and cliched. And I think you brought forward how it doesn't need to be seen in that way and how it can be actually quite revealing and a way to open up, thinking about the relationship between place and biography. I think we always knew that Hepworth has a great seriousness, a kind of high-mindedness, which I think was probably one of the reasons why she wasn't so popular in her time. And maybe it still is a problem for us, how to communicate that earnestness and seriousness, which we've seen in the library. She didn't want to be an easy artist, I don't think. She wanted to express difficult, complicated ideas. And that's maybe a challenge for us now in terms of how to communicate the seriousness that lies behind her work. It's both, we can think about biography in terms of the conventional approach, but also the unconventional. Maybe we can start to use landscape as a way of allowing us to think about Hepworth as a woman, even if she didn't want herself to be promoted as a woman sculptor and certainly not as a sculptress. In fact, if we give ourselves a little bit more license to use some new thinking, we can understand what is unusual about her and what's different. And I think it was, I forget who it was, someone talked about the relationship between motherhood and tactility. And it's not talked about very much, but if we actually allowed ourselves that license to think about the relationship, we probably would go further into understanding something about why her sculpture is special and different. And I think actually it might be fair to say now that there are more people working on Barbara Hepworth than on Henry Moore. So we're always kind of a little bit embarrassed about comparing Hepworth to Moore and say Moore comes in too often. But in fact, I think there's more interest now. There are more people in this room now who are doing current research on Hepworth than I think we would find on Henry Moore. So let's not be embarrassed about it. Let's celebrate that diversity of approach. The upcoming projects, I thought people were curiously restrained in talking about their upcoming projects. And I thought Natalie did a good job in describing the upcoming project alongside, but I think we could be more explicit about the nature of that project and what we learn from looking at sculpture by women. It doesn't just need to be a list. We need to think about what it means and what it teaches us. There's no need to hold back, I don't feel. And similarly, we've heard almost nothing about the Hepworth exhibition that's going to be held here next year. And it's a shame that we haven't had time to think about what that might be. And I suppose I feel from the last day and a half we've had one option is to do something that is a standard survey retrospective and do it as well as you possibly could, because some people, especially younger people in this room, feel they've never seen that. And other people would like to see new voices and new responses and new contexts. And I suppose the question for us really is, to what extent do we need to find those new contexts, or is it that are we embarrassed to do a standard retrospective of Barbara Hepworth, or is that boring to us now, and do we need to open up those new contexts and think about her in a new way? I suppose I feel that there's something that is static and unchanging about Hepworth, which for good and for bad. We do need to think about responses which are changing and allow us to think about changing ways of thinking about her. I think that's always been a dichotomy in Hepworth studies, and that hasn't changed. And I think we need to try and kind of celebrate what is, you might say, eternal in her work, but also think about new ways of interpreting her and allow some of the new ways of thinking about her to emerge and to be present. And in terms of the network, when I arrived yesterday at lunchtime, Michael said, why do we need a network? Everyone knows everyone already. But it's not true. I mean, there's more people in this room that I don't know than I do know. So in a way, it does exist, but I think it needs to be made more visible. I really do feel that the Hepworth here in Wakefield could do something to show that. All these different people with different ways of thinking about Hepworth, their voices could be visible here now, not just in a closed workshop, but in the galleries, different, in modest ways. I think that different researchers' work could already be visible. And then, of course, we need to cultivate a wider network. Simon Wallace talked about the younger generation, but there's plenty of pretty young people in this room, I feel, even if I'm one of the older ones. But obviously his concern is how to make Hepworth interesting to teenagers and to really younger people. And that's something that is going to be a challenge for you in the exhibition, and I guess it is on a daily basis. I still feel a key lacuna in Hepworth is the international context. And we keep looking at her in relation to pretty much English artists and the English art scene. And if there could be a chance to do an exhibition in which there were international counterparts at the same time, I think that would be really great. And to look at her work of all periods in relation to international figures. It's more expensive, of course, to do that, but I think it would be worthwhile, because I think she herself reveals that she's always thinking internationally, not just nationally.